Welcome to Bad at Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edges of extinction. We'll share species research information and conservation proposals, and then we'll spend a chunk of the show opening a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a kind of meditative soundscape of gentleness, quietude, reflection, and maybe mourning. There is a very low likelihood that any of these species will survive the 21st century, and so perhaps we might acknowledge their passage with a moment of our attention, with the recognition of our kinship, and with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee. The Rusty Patched Bumble Bee is a medium-sized bee, native to North America, mainly in the midwestern United States. Rusty Patched bumblebees range in size from 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch. They have 5 eyes, 2 large compound eyes situated on either side of their head, and 3 simple eyes arranged in a triangle pattern at the top of their head. A compound eye is composed of numerous light-sensitive units. Each has a separate visual receptor with its own lens, cornea, and photoreceptor cells. And so for the bees, this results in like a kind of mosaic, kaleidoscopic seeing that is adapted for motion detection, light sensitivity, color recognition, and a wide field of vision. And then the bee's 3 simple eyes are thought to be used for light detection and lateral orientation. The Rusty Patched Bumblebee is covered in dense fur that aids in thermoregulation, helping the cold-blooded insect maintain a stable body temperature. Their fur is electrostatically charged, which aids in pollen collection. The charged hairs attract and hold the pollen. And some hair on the bee is adapted for sensory input, detecting vibrations, airflow, and even electrical fields. Historically, rusty patched bumblebees thrived in a variety of habitats across eastern and midwestern North America. These include prairies, woodlands, marshes, farmlands, and even like urban residential parks and gardens. It's places with temperate climate, diverse and abundant flowers, as well as safe nesting sites near the bee's food sources. Their historic range extended from Quebec and Maine in the north and east to Minnesota in the west and Georgia in the south. But today its population range is fractured and much smaller, with bee concentrations found in Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois. Rusty Patched Bumblebees live in colonies and are eusocial, meaning they demonstrate an advanced and complex social structure that includes cooperative care of young, overlapping generations within a colony of adults, and a division of labor into reproductive and non-reproductive groups. For the Rusty Patched Bumblebee, these groupings typically involve one egg-laying queen, many non-reproductive female workers, and a caste of reproductive males called drones and females called gines. The queen, of course, is responsible for initial reproduction and colony management. The non-reproductive female workers gather pollen and nectar and protect and maintain the nest. And the drones and gines are responsible for expanding the colony and producing the next generation of bees. Colony can include as many as 1,000 individuals, with a single queen and her colony typically sharing a single nest, which is usually found 1 to 4 feet underground, often in the abandoned burrows of small mammals like chipmunks, squirrels, mice, and voles. The nest consists of a cluster of irregularly shaped wax cells that are used to store pollen, nectar, and to rear developing young. Bumblebees do not make honey, so unlike the rigid hexagonal combs of honeybee hives, instead, bumblebee nests are less structured. They're not perfectly uniform, and the overall shape of the nest varies based on the hole that it's in. They're opportunistic nesters, using spaces that have been nested in previously by other species. The Rusty Patched Bumblebee has a seasonal, annual life cycle. In the spring, a queen emerges from hibernation and starts a new colony, building the nest, laying eggs, and raising the first batch of worker bees. These workers then take over the tasks of foraging for food, caring for new young, and maintaining the nest. And then, throughout the year, the colony grows as the queen continues to lay eggs and raise workers. And then in late summer, new gines and drones are born, and these reproductive bees leave the nest forever to mate and launch new colonies. Bumblebees mate sexually, the drone inserting his reproductive organs into the gine's abdomen, and then the gine stores the sperm in her body and uses it to fertilize eggs throughout her life. So this single mating event is sufficient for her to produce all of the offspring that she needs to establish and maintain a new colony. The drone then, having fulfilled his reproductive role, typically dies shortly after mating, while this gine, who is in fact now like a new queen, finds a safe place to hibernate for the winter. And then the following spring, the cycle begins again with these new queens emerging from hibernation to establish their own colonies. And so Rusty Patched Bumblebees typically live approximately a year or less. Rusty Patched bumblebees primarily communicate through pheromones, which are chemical signals that convey information. Queens use pheromones to control worker behavior, while workers use them to mark visited flowers and signal the nest's location. Tactile communication through antenna sensing and physical interaction has been observed in the Rusty Patched Bumblebee, and buzzing and vibrations are also thought to convey information, suspecting that louder buzzes indicate like excitement or threat. Unlike honeybees, bumblebees cannot communicate the precise location of food sources, but they can indicate general direction and quality. And so as such, workers tend to forage nearby, usually within just a few square miles of their nest. Rusty Patched bumblebees rely on pollen and nectar for all of their nutrients. The pollen supplies lipids and proteins, while the nectar provides carbohydrates. They quickly starve without nectar, and so they'll often seek out flowers with really high sugar content. That said, the pollen is equally important, providing bees with all of the amino acids that they need to survive, while also providing organic compounds that aid the bees in hormone production, communication, and disease protection. Different flowers offer different pollen types, so each with varying protein and lipid ratios. And so the Rusty Patched Bumblebee has a diverse diet, feeding on numerous flower species, including nightshade, milkweed, clover, bleeding heart, sunflower, willow, asters, and peas. They also play a crucial role in pollinating many domesticated crops like tomatoes, currants, cranberries, blueberries, peppers, and squashes. In the dream, the flowers sing and speak. And in the dream, the flowers dance and draw me to them uncanny. And it is pleasure and purpose and joy to feel petal against skin, pollen in my hair, and to drink from their sweet basket. To be held and nourished and trusted. I want for little else in my life. Well, except, of course, to fly. In the dream, to fly. Rusty Patched Bumblebee behavior and activity is influenced by air temperature and weather. For example, they do not fly in rainy, foggy, or freezing conditions. Though they are able to tolerate colder temperatures compared to other pollinators due to their thick, furry bodies. They tend to be most active around dusk and dawn. Rusty Patched bumblebees are generally docile and less aggressive compared to honeybees or wasps. will only defend the territory immediately surrounding their nests, and then only when provoked by predators or other disturbances. Researchers have observed evidence of play in bumblebees, seeming to interact with objects like just for the fun of it. Scientists at Queen Mary University in London placed a group of 45 bumblebees in a container where they could follow a straight path to a tasty sugar solution, or they could take a detour to a space filled with these like small wooden balls. The bees repeatedly chose to go out of their way to like roll the balls around, seeming to play sometimes for like 30 seconds or more. And there's like no obvious incentive for the bumblebees to even go to that section with the wooden balls, let alone like spend time rolling them about. But that behavior was even repeated after initial curiosity was satisfied. And so the researchers can offer no other explanation other than that the bees somehow found like the game, that play, rewarding. Human encroachment leading to habitat degradation and loss poses a major threat to the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee. The conversion of prairies and grasslands across the US into monoculture farms and sprawling suburbs has drastically reduced their natural habitat. Other invasive farming practices like the widespread use of pesticides disrupts their foraging and reproduction, and the industrial agricultural practice of importing other pollinators outside of their natural habitat leads to the spread of disease. These are pathogens and parasites that weaken bee populations and make them more susceptible to other threats. Human-induced climate change compounds the existing and presents additional challenges. Rising temperatures, altered precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events can affect the availability of flowering plants, nesting sites, and foraging opportunities. We cannot overstate the fundamental and vital role that bumblebee play in their native ecosystems. In the course of their own pollen gathering, they're also spreading pollen, fertilizing flowers and trees, contributing to the reproduction and diversity of local plant systems, and ensuring the growth and long-term health and viability of all plants in their habitat, and then which in turn supports the wildlife that depends on those plants for food, water, and shelter. And so bumblebee species loss just has like this substantive ripple effect throughout its habitat. With many of the species we discuss in our show, it can feel like there's little immediate, like day-to-day impact that any of us can have on that species' well-being. Though in the case of the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee, for many of us, some relatively small effort can help encourage their rebound. Maintaining a garden, or even just like adding a flowering tree or shrub to our yards can make a difference. At the most basic, Rusty Patched bumblebees need nectar and pollen to survive. And so plants native to their habitat like asters, milkweed, and local wildflowers are excellent sources of food. We can avoid planting invasive and non-native species, and also create untouched areas of our yards, leaving sections unmowed and brushy, which can help provide safe nesting sites. And of course, avoiding pesticides and chemical fertilizers that harm bees and other pollinators. And lastly, when possible, we can try to avoid purchasing produce grown using the monoculture and industrial farming techniques that have undermined the bee's habitat, that overuse pesticides and that spread disease. So we can make choices at the grocery store, in fact, that can help promote the bee's rebound. The Rusty Patched Bumble Bee was added to the IUCN Red List of Critically Endangered Species in 2014. Its population is currently in decline. Though we do not have precise individual counts, it is estimated that the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee population has declined by 92% in the last 40 years. Research for today's show was compiled from the IUCN, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Animal Diversity Web at the University of Michigan, BBC Wildlife Magazine, and Wikipedia. In a moment, I would like to perform some music in hopes of opening a space to be in contemplation of the other lives with whom we share our little earth. But first, I want to clarify that this music is not for the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee. I don't know if the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee even listens to ambient music. And so I don't intend this to be my extracting meaning or putting meaning upon the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee. That's a living being who has agency and wisdom and desires that are, frankly, unknowable to me. And so instead, I want this music to express my exceptional awe, just my human awe at other life. And I want this music to provide an opportunity for me to consider my relationship to that other life. And so I will sit in the space of sound, awe, and contemplation, and I warmly invite you to join me. I honor the life force of the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee. I endeavor to hold its name in awe and remembrance gently on my tongue. I am grateful to have shared time on our small bright planet with this amazing little being. I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. And so, in the name of the Rusty Patched Bumble Bee, I pledge to reduce my consumption and my carbon footprint and curb my wastefulness. I pledge to address the costs of my actions and inactions. I pledge to plant something flowering in the springtime. And I pledge to name and resist the harm of any kin or their habitat by corporations and governments. I pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, and to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Bad at Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin. Goodbye.